Thank you for joining today's session. Speakers today include myself, Ann Campbell. I'm the Library Automation Manager with EBSCO Information Services. Also speaking today will be Sean Romaine, the Director of Acquisitions and Rapid Cataloging Services at the University of Washington, Denise Branch, Head of Electronic and Continuing Resources at Virginia Commonwealth University, and Dennis Bridges, Senior Director and Product Owner for Folio. We chose today's session name because as a team, we approached our project with an open mind and no limitations. Our motto was "The sky is the limit." With that frame of mind, we knew there was a business cycle we wanted to improve, and each team member was willing to explore every avenue and path along the way to accomplish our goal. From the beginning, it was clear building a team with experience and expertise from different organizations representing different departments meant juggling our workload to set time aside for the project. Every team member devoted time for meetings, process reviews, documentation, testing, and answering questions. The project's main goal was to improve the overall journal renewal cycle. Libraries use multiple systems to complete the serials renewal process. It's a time-consuming, detail-oriented workflow that we all thought had room for improvement. Our goal was to accommodate unique workflows across multiple user interfaces and ensure a valuable user experience. Reviewing multiple ILS vendor platforms and gathering details about unique workflows revealed integration points which would allow multiple systems to work together and alleviate customer pain points. Roundtable discussions, meeting at conferences, and vendor-hosted brainstorming sessions uncovered the good, the bad, and the ugly points of the existing workflows. It is important to interview a wide range of users, including product owners, vendors, and internal staff, to not only get the big picture, but also see the small details. Before we could even consider development, we had to justify the time and expense required to complete the project. Customer development partners provided lists of renewal tasks completed and time spent per task to compare against what we proposed as a new service. This provided a measurable way to confirm the end result would indeed provide value. In addition to gathering measurable data, each vendor demonstrated their journal renewal user interface. Task-based customizable systems meant a new service needed to be flexible. Documenting the pros and cons of each system turned out to be a great way to identify where value could be added. Once the development was approved and release 1 was completed, beta testing revealed bugs and defects. This was expected and must be put into perspective. We had to ask ourselves which defect is a showstopper. Can we release to the public as it is, or do we need to wait until certain issues are resolved? The first release went out to a small and controlled group. This allowed users to use the service with an understanding of the current issues and our resolution timelines. The proper expectation was set with this limited group. Over time, the bugs and defects were corrected, and more customers were added, using the service still on a small scale. Testing in sandboxes and limited use in production not only allowed time for bugs and defects to be resolved, but also put experience under our belts to better prepare for the larger rollout. To increase the comfort level of the service, customers can access reports and logs with details showing the success and error rate of the service. In addition, the API alerts and error responses are published, providing the necessary transparency for everyone to understand and address the errors. They can also make any necessary corrections for the next renewal cycle. To increase usage, sharing information about the new service to a wide audience was key. To get the word out, it is important to understand your audience, both internal and external. The main goal was to present the service, understand customer needs, ensure users were comfortable using the service, and provide the necessary tools for success. One-on-one training and individual testing sessions, though time-consuming, provided the best results. This allowed users to see the service in their own environment and address questions and workflows specific to their needs. And now I'll hand it over to Sean.
As Anne has mentioned, in order for EBSCO to initiate development, they needed to understand our renewal workflows in our Alma ILS. They also needed to have an idea of how much time was involved in our renewal process and how much time could be saved with an integration. Our serials team got together and broke out our subscription renewal workflow into a series of steps. Then we timed how long each step took on average so we could give Anne accurate estimates of how much time was involved in the renewal process. While we recorded the minimum amount of time each step took, we still made sure we completed each step carefully. And we also wanted to know which staff were involved along the way. Next slide. We have multiple renewal workflows, as some renewals may involve format changes, title changes, or packages and combination orders. For the purposes of this project, we focused on mapping out the steps involved in updating a single purchase order line in Alma to show a subscription had been simply renewed or simply canceled. On average, we estimated that a very simple, straightforward renewal of a single title subscription could take between 4 and 10 minutes. A simple cancellation would take slightly longer due to the holdings coverage information also needing to be updated and additional notes added to track the cancellation. We have approximately 3,400 serial orders with EBSCO, so assuming that each order would take a minimum of 4 minutes to process in both Alma and EBSCOnet, we estimated that staff would probably spend about 225 hours updating records as part of the subscription renewal process. Obviously, managing packages or handling format changes would be much more time and staff intensive, but we felt that we had reasonably accurate estimates of the minimum amount of time required to manage the bulk of our renewals. Next slide. While we estimated the integration would save over 200 hours of staff time, that was in a world where we were fully staffed and every Alma purchase order line was updated as part of the renewal process. In reality, staffing reductions on the serials team meant that most of our Alma purchase order lines did not get fully updated when we renewed subscriptions. For the bulk of our PO lines, we relied on the Alma PO line renewal job to automatically increment the renewal date on January 1st and left it at that. We didn't track in Alma the date the subscriptions had been approved in the EBSCOnet renewal cart. We didn't update vendor reference numbers in Alma, and we didn't update the order line list price to reflect next year's pricing. We also didn't always input cancellation restrictions or renewal notes. To us, the ability to pull all this information automatically into Alma from EBSCOnet as part of the renewal cart checkout process was very exciting. No matter how the integration worked out, our order records could only get better than they were now. Next slide. We were fortunate in that we have an Alma Premium Sandbox available for testing. We were thus able to test the integration with orders in our sandbox and then compare the results to what we had in our production environment. We picked a variety of orders to simulate what might happen when orders were renewed in batch. In addition to selecting both print and online orders to renew and cancel, we also made sure we selected purchase order lines created in Alma, as well as order lines that had migrated from our legacy integrated library system. As part of the testing process, we confirmed what fields in the purchase order line were available for updating via the API. We determined what fields we thought must be updated as part of the integration, for example, the renewal date and order line notes, and also determined what fields would be nice to have updated, but weren't necessarily critical for the first iteration of the integration, for example, renewal and cancellation notes from EBSCOnet. Next slide. Some of what we consider successes during the development phase were not the actual end goals of the project, but the winding paths along the way. For example, as we began testing the API, we encountered behaviors that we were not expecting, requiring us to open support cases. It was very satisfying to have EBSCO and developers at Ex Libris working together quickly and responsively to help us find the bright places where boom bands are playing. Two benefits that we did not anticipate at the start of the project was having our own staff develop a better understanding of how the Alma Acquisitions API worked and learning more about how our Alma ILS and EBSCOnet are designed to function. Next slide. was also extremely interesting for us to get an in-depth look at a vendor's development cycle. We gained a better understanding of how vendors and customers can partner together for a win-win improvement. Having a chance to see a mock-up of the proposed integration in EBSCOnet really helped make everything concrete and less abstract. Suddenly, we could begin to see the end result of all our discussions and testing and visualize how this was all going to work in reality. Having another library, such as VCU, as a development partner also gave us insight into our own workflows and helped us confirm our hopes and dreams for the integration were not ours alone. The most concrete benefit, of course, was having the integration update information in our purchase order lines in real time that we would not otherwise have time to update. We can now look in Alma to see when a renewal was approved in EBSCOnet without having to check in EBSCOnet. And we can now see in EBSCOnet that the renewal information was successfully transmitted to Alma without having to check in Alma. Next slide. Of course, the testing phase was not without its challenges. We had to set aside time to test, and test again to ensure that the integration would not corrupt our order records. When we did encounter a problem, we had to spend time figuring out what might have gone wrong. Was the behavior expected? Was the problem with the API, incorrect information in Alma, incorrect information in EBSCO, or a combination of all three? Once we determined the cause of the error, we had to carefully document what happened and open a support case so Ex Libris could understand what was going on. In some cases, the API did not behave as expected. For example, the put request resulted in our order line notes being reordered and all order line notes showing as having been updated by the API, even though the note's contents had not changed. We learned that this behavior was baked into the API and could not be changed. Although the API was not acting as we had hoped, we agreed that the integration was still greatly beneficial. And while we are still working out a bug or two, we believe that the problem may be unique to our Alma environment. Next slide. We have now used the integration for both our 2022 off-cycle renewals and our 2023 calendar year renewals. We've really appreciated the flexibility the integration offers. For example, the ability to turn the integration on and off as we work through the renewal cart, as well as the ability to locally determine what order line fields we want updated, means that we can make the integration work for us. And of course, staff can spend their time working on higher level tasks now that some of this has been automated. Despite the setbacks along the way, it really feels like the whole process was a success. And now I'll turn it over to Denise to talk about VCU's experience.
Thanks, Sean. My name is Denise Branch, and I'm the head of Electronic and Continuing Resources at Virginia Commonwealth University. Next slide. Every year during renewal time, my department works on approximately 1,800 subscription renewals. Each subscription record is manually touched to verify that the subscription should be renewed, and steps are taken to renew, make updates, and any other actions needed. Next slide. It was very important to share this information with EBSCO about our renewal workflows during the design phase of the new integration service. This diagram shows a snapshot of the work involved, which includes reviewing, verifying, and updating every subscription. We toggle between EBSCOnet and Alma, making updates and reconciling data. Next slide. You can see from this list the numerous pain points that we encounter when working the renewals. Next slide. Why become a development partner? Our department has a desire for a workflow that is less labor intensive and more efficient. We are familiar with EBSCOnet and have an excellent relationship with EBSCO. Developing an innovative solution to the renewal workflow, like using an API, means working alongside EBSCO to support their efforts to improve the quality of their services and products for customers like us. We wanted to collaborate with EBSCO to identify improvements that can provide sustainable benefits for libraries in the future. Next slide. I never really thought about all the processes and steps and time spent working renewals. I just know it's a lot. When EBSCO asked me to identify the processes, steps, and the time spent per function, I was blown away by the number of steps and the time it took to complete the renewal for just one subscription. I calculated that there can be up to 11 processes and include almost 50 steps to complete a renewal, including working in 2 systems. A simple renewal can take approximately 10 to 15 minutes. However, a complex renewal can take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes or even more. Multiply this by 1,800 subscriptions, and what do you get? As Dr. Seuss says, I don't choose to go there. Next slide. We plan implementation of the EBSCOnet Alma integration in 2022 for 2023 renewals. We cleaned up parent-child membership combination records. We ensured EBSCO had correct POLs and fund codes, and we closed inactive orders. Next slide. Our journey started at Charleston, where EBSCO met with Alma customers, where they shared progress on this new project, and informal conversations began to gather customer ideas on an integrated workflow. At a later date, EBSCO shared the proposed workflow diagram from Ex Libris. We were encouraged to give feedback that would improve the process and make our workflows easier. As the project moved along, EBSCO asked if we wanted to provide a written list of the steps in our single subscription and collection renewal workflow process and include an estimation of time it takes to complete each step. They wanted to compare our list of tasks and identify which steps could be made easier or be eliminated altogether because the step is now completely automated between EBSCO and Alma. We were able to test the new service and provide feedback on what features worked, didn't work, and possibly needed modifications. EBSCO asked questions, and we provided them with answers to the best of our ability. It was great to collaborate with Sean from the University of Washington on testing. EBSCO provided us with training. We cleaned up records and submitted the renewals in batches and checked for errors as we went along. We looked for anything that might seem odd or needed correcting. We discovered 34 titles that had error messages. A few of them required us to correct data. However, there were some error messages that were unclear to us. I created a Google document of the 34 errors and shared it with EBSCO. I was very happy to only see 34 errors from the 1,800 subscriptions that were submitted for renewal. I believe our error numbers were so low because of the cleanup work we did before implementation. And a big thanks goes to Anne for suggesting the cleanup to us. Next slide. Successes, and I'm just going to emphasize a few. There were automatic updates which improved staff efficiency, so they saved time and ensured accuracy. There's flexibility to pick and choose between fields to send to Alma. We can manage renewals in one place, and that's EBSCOnet. There is synchronization of important data points within 2 systems. And last but not least, EBSCO staff is helpful, attentive, and receptive to our needs. Next slide. Challenges. Some error messages are difficult for customers to decipher. Some records that are not journals, such as ebooks and electronic continuations, can result in errors. The API changes the existing dates of all notes under the Notes tab in the Alma order record, leaving no way to identify internal modification dates, which is causing us to lose historical data. To address this issue for now, we are adding a date and author to all of our new notes in Alma to maintain history. Replacement of updated on and updated by information in Alma by the API delivery date can leave a record cluttered and challenging to read. It is difficult to find a specific note and author, especially if the order log contains a lot of notes. However, Sean added an idea exchange to Ex Libris, requesting to add the created by column to the Notes tab of the PO line so the originator of the note is visible. And I just wanted to share some lessons that we learned. Clean up your records, very important. Maintain good communication. Innovation brings solutions to problems. The innovative world encourages creativity and experimentation, and by collaborating with EBSCO, we were able to find a solution to our renewal challenges that is much more efficient and impactful in our work. Make sure you know what is going right and make sure you know what is going wrong. This is when testing is crucial. You always want to test, test, and then test again to ensure that you understand what the service will do for you and ways to further improve on what's already been built. And I will now turn it over to Dennis.
Thank you so much. I have to remark listening to everyone, talking about all the effort that went into this really is incredible. And I think the story of Folio participating in this integration is similar in terms of user impact. But what made this experience interesting or unique for Folio is in part just kind of what makes Folio different from many platforms. And that is, open source. First, there's no single entity that owns Folio per se. The OLF is the steward of Folio project and engagement, but the code is available to anyone, and essentially anyone can contribute to it. And so the stakeholder group is maybe a bit more horizontally distributed. Everyone has some skin in the game, and in general, the community, which is kind of made up of libraries and vendors, provides requirements. The implementers, which also made up of libraries and vendors and folks who are hosting and using the platform and so on, are driving the priorities. Software developers are contributing solutions. Hosting providers specifically are also ensuring that the functionality is delivered to users and kind of continues to run smoothly. So the path toward implementing an integration like this for an open source platform is a bit different than it would be for other platforms, maybe. There needs to be engagement with all stakeholders. Not only do we need to consider how all Folio users might interact with the functionality, but we also had to consider how it might add value to the platform as a whole. And the EBSCO team's collaborative, open-minded approach to this integration really is what made this possible for Folio. So we'll go to the next slide. There are a handful of different entities, and I want to talk about that a little bit, that you need to consider when developing for Folio. They've all worked together for many years to deliver what we consider to be Folio today. The community council is kind of focused on the direction of the project as a whole and making strategic decisions. The technical council is focused on the architectural integrity, the technical integrity of the platform, making decisions about architecture, how things should be sort of implemented. The product council is focused on growing adoption and cultivating a product and making sort of management-like decisions. The special interest groups, or the SIGs, are in place to discuss the functionality, to focus on specific domains, and to review and test functionality as it's developed. And product owners are there to define and refine features, to talk with the SIGs, to come up with functionality that is needed, to refine it, to communicate it to development groups, and help all that stuff get implemented. So we have this term subject matter experts, and I'm realizing that really applies to all of the different groups above, because subject matter experts are folks, from the library industry who either worked in software or worked in libraries and bring a certain knowledge to the community, and they participate in all of these other groups. Next slide. So in the case of the Folio community and how this integration sort of came together, we'd already kind of established an idea, or this need for a type of order that could be renewed over time, and outlined what information these orders should contain. Also, that often, libraries would be working with vendors to manage these types of orders in external systems. And there was a lot of crossover between the functions that needed to be performed sometimes in those two systems. And so the community discussed what sort of time savings might exist, and some of that I think has been sort of already described today as well. They discussed how they could prevent some of the duplication of functions between systems, and talked about bringing some vendors together to the table to talk about what could be done to make this happen. And this is essentially when I started working with Anne and the EBSCOnet team. And Anne mentioned, demonstrating, documenting, and a lot of folks have talked about, the documents that had to be put together, the analysis that went into this. We essentially brought requirements together from a lot of different groups, the Folio community, Alma users, the EBSCOnet team, product development that's working on Folio. And these had to be refined into something achievable, but still meaningful. So we started mocking up how the integration would work, and then reviewing those details with the SIG, special interest group, specifically the acquisitions group, and customizing or deciding where the customization might live, what side of the equation that would have to be on. And ultimately, a complete solution was proposed to the Folio community, starting with the acquisition SIG. It was clear at this stage that this work would offer some real innovations and also provide a number of wins to different stakeholder groups in the Folio community. And so it was prioritized accordingly. Next slide. This is when we started development, and Folio is an agile project. So it employs the iterative method and the incremental build model. Essentially, features are broken down into small pieces so they can be implemented within like a 2-week sprint and then tested as they're implemented. So small chunks, frequent testing. And this way, feedback can be reviewed and then incorporated before a feature is fully completed, before everything is really materialized. And Folio is also a microservices architecture. So modules need to operate as their own kind of domain and not require things from other modules to function. So orders is its own domain. And this drove some innovation in how we thought about implementing this integration in Folio. We ended up building the ability to update orders from an external service like EBSCOnet into a common module called Edge Orders. We then added all the EBSCOnet specific functions into a different module called Mod EBSCOnet. So this not only allows the EBSCOnet integration to be unique and have its own sort of powerful logic in how it goes about updating orders in Folio, but it also isolates it from changes that are happening in Folio in other places. It also opens the possibility for other integrations to leverage the update function that we added to Edge Orders. So other services can use Edge Orders to update orders and build other order integrations. Next slide. So that takes us to a lot of the hard work. As I mentioned before, testing is a critical part of development in Folio and really everywhere, but it was also an impressive part of this collaboration because coordinating testing and functionality like this is often the most difficult part of implementation, I think. Getting the appropriate data, connecting isolated systems, building test environments, debugging connections, debugging code on both sides of the integration. Ultimately, we need to test and test and test and test again. And that was said before, but it requires trust and patience and great communication from all sides to get all of this coordinated and to get this integration working in a reasonable amount of time. I have to give credit to Anne for being a key part of that and getting us all communicating together between Folio and EBSCOnet and involving all of these different communities, all these different stakeholders. Feedback was incorporated after each of these test cycles, and the iterations were deployed with additional functionality, with fixes on both sides of the equation. Again, an example of how this kind of benefited the integration, we didn't initially plan to release the ability to trigger order cancellation through this, but it was something that came up while users were testing. They identified that if we had added, if we added this particular thing, it might actually prevent them from having to touch those orders at all again after they've made their decision in the EBSCOnet system. So obviously could be a huge time saver for the cancellation workflow, and we decided to incorporate that into the final solution. Next slide. Talking about the final solution, I think the result of this was very cool. And ultimately, the collaboration resulted in a number of wins, like I said before, for Folio stakeholders. Implementers that are using or planning to use EBSCOnet for renewals gained workflow efficiencies, unique workflow efficiencies. And EBSCO improved their service offerings, expanded their reach, and the Folio platform lowered the cost of future order integrations that require updates to orders. So overall, it was, a really impressive collaboration and a powerful integration for Folio. So I'll turn things back over to Anne.
Thanks, Dennis. So now that the EBSCOnet renewal integration service is successfully in production with Folio and Alma, work will continue to enhance the service based on user requests and market needs. We will also reach out to additional ILS vendors in hopes to obtain more development partners. So thank you again for your time and interest in today's session. I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.